It was a quiet afternoon, the kind that feels heavier than silence itself. Rain was tapping gently against my window, and the smell of wet earth filled the air. I sat by the window with a cup of tea in my hands, though I had forgotten to drink it. The steam had long disappeared, just like so many moments in my life that I didn't hold on to long enough. That was the day I realized my son no longer called me Mom. It wasn't loud or cruel. There was no argument, no raised voice. It was just a single word. Amina, he said, like he was talking to someone who no longer belonged in that special corner of his heart. And in that moment, something inside me went still. I smiled, but it wasn't the kind of smile that comes from happiness. It was the kind that keeps your tears from falling when someone's watching. I don't think he even noticed. He was busy looking at his phone, telling me he'd be late for dinner because they had plans. I said, "Of course, go. You're young." But when the door closed behind him, the silence in that room grew louder than any sound I'd ever heard. The echo of his footsteps lingered like the sound of memories refusing to fade. I remember thinking, when did this happen? When did my little boy, the one who used to hold my hand and say, "Mom, don't ever leave me," forget the sound of that word? Maybe it wasn't that day. Maybe it had been happening slowly, quietly, like sunlight fading before you notice it's gone. But that afternoon, that was the first time I felt truly alone. I looked around the room, the photo on the wall of his 10th birthday, the half-faded painting he made in school, the cushion he used to throw on the floor while watching cartoons. All these small things whispered memories back to me. And I sat there holding my cold tea, whispering softly to myself, "It's all right. Mothers don't stop loving, even when their children forget." When people look at me now, they see a quiet old woman who spends too much time looking out the window. But there was a time when my house was never silent. It was filled with laughter, with running feet, with little questions and messy toys. It was filled with my son, my whole world. His name is Ayan. I still remember the first time I held him. He was so tiny that I was afraid to breathe too hard, as if even my breath could break him. But when he opened his eyes and looked at me, I knew my life had found its reason. I wasn't rich. I didn't have grand dreams. All I wanted was to raise a child who would feel loved, who would never have to wonder if he mattered. I used to hum songs to him at night, old lullabies my mother sang to me. Sometimes he would stop crying just to listen, his little hand clutching my finger. Back then, I thought love was something you could wrap around someone like a blanket, and it would stay forever. I didn't know how fragile love could become when silence grows between people. My husband, Salim, was a quiet man. He worked hard, spoke little, and smiled even less. But he adored Ayan. Every evening when he came home from the factory, he would lift our boy into his arms and say, "Who's my little hero?" Ayan would giggle and say, "Me, Baba." And I would watch them, my two worlds laughing together under the flickering light of our small home. We didn't have much, but we had enough. A small house with a leaky roof, a patch of garden out front, and a heart that always seemed full. Our neighbors often said, Amina, your son is your blessing. And I would smile proudly because I believed it. From the moment he could talk, Ayan was curious about everything. Why is the sky blue, Mom? Why does the moon follow us when we walk? Sometimes I had no answers, but he didn't mind. He just wanted to talk. He loved sitting beside me when I cooked, his small feet dangling from the kitchen stool, asking questions between mouthfuls of mango slices. Even when I was tired, even when my hands ached from housework, I never told him to stop, because his voice was my favorite sound. When Ayan started school, I cried after dropping him off. He waved from the gate with his lunchbox in hand, smiling, excited. But I walked home with tears streaming down my face. The house felt strange without him. The toys on the floor looked out of place, like they too were waiting for him to come back. That's when I realized a mother's world begins to shrink the day her child takes his first step away from her. Years passed. He grew taller, smarter, more confident. He was good at his studies, always near the top of the class. Sometimes teachers would call to tell me how polite and kind he was. Those words meant more to me than anything money could buy. Every certificate he brought home, I framed on the wall, not because of the marks, but because of the effort behind them. When Salim passed away, Ayan was only 15. That day, I saw him grow up overnight. He didn't cry much, though I knew he wanted to. Instead, he held my hand and said, "Don't worry, Mom. I'll take care of you." And I believed him, because when your child says something with that much love, you don't hear the years that might change it. You only hear the promise. We struggled for a while after that. Bills piled up, the roof leaked worse than ever, and there were days when we ate simple bread and tea. But we had each other, and that was enough to keep me smiling through the dark times. Sometimes at night, I would peek into his room and find him studying late. He'd be half asleep on his books, pencil still in his hand. I would cover him with a blanket, switch off the light, and whisper, "Good night, my son." He always murmured, half dreaming, "Good night, Mom." Even that sleepy word felt like a blessing. When he got his first job, I remember how proud he was. He came running into the kitchen, waving the appointment letter in his hand. "Mom, they chose me. I'll be starting next week." I hugged him so tight, he laughed and said, "Mom, you're choking me." That was one of the happiest days of my life. He insisted on taking me out for dinner, our first time in a proper restaurant. I didn't even know how to read the menu, but he ordered everything I liked. He told me, "From now on, you won't have to worry about anything." I smiled, thinking he really did keep his promise. He worked hard. Long hours, late nights. He said he was doing it for us, for a better life, for my comfort, and I believed him again, just as I always did. But slowly, I began to notice things changing. He talked less, dinner became quiet, he started spending weekends out with friends. When I asked him where he was going, he'd say, "Just out, Mom. You wouldn't know them." It wasn't said harshly, but it left a small ache in my chest. I knew it was natural. Children grow, they seek their own space, but I couldn't help missing the little boy who once followed me everywhere. Then came the day he told me he wanted to get married. His eyes sparkled when he said her name, Sarah. I had never seen him that happy. I still remember that smile. It was the same one he had when he was 5 and got his first bicycle. I told him, "If she makes you this happy, then she must be a good person." He hugged me, whispered, "Thank you, Mom," and for a moment, I felt young again, like everything would be fine. I met Sarah a few weeks later. She was beautiful, graceful, polite, and a little shy. At first, I thought she was perfect for him. She helped me set the table, asked me about recipes, and called me auntie with a sweet smile. But as time passed, I began to sense a quiet distance in her eyes, a politeness that stayed at the surface but never went deeper. She was kind, yes, but not warm. Still, I didn't complain. Love makes you overlook many small things, especially when it's for your child's happiness. After their wedding, Ayan moved to a new apartment across the city. It was the first time in 27 years that I woke up in an empty house. No sound of slippers dragging across the floor, no kettle whistling for 2 cups of tea. Just me, the ticking clock, and a heart that tried to stay brave. I told myself he needs space. Every son does after marriage. I didn't want to be the kind of mother who clings too tightly. So I gave him time. I waited for his calls, his visits. At first, he called every night. "How are you, Mom? Did you eat?" But those calls became shorter. Then they stopped coming daily, then weekly, and eventually only when I called first. Still, I told myself, he's busy. He's building a life. I should be proud. And I was, but there was also a silence growing between us, and I didn't know how to cross it. The months that followed felt slow, like walking through water. Every day looked the same: morning tea, sweeping the porch, feeding the stray cats, waiting for a phone call that seldom came. Loneliness, I learned, doesn't arrive all at once. It settles quietly, a little deeper each day. Then, one afternoon, something unexpected happened. My neighbor's daughter, Nita, came running to my door, breathless. "Auntie Amina, I saw your son at the market. He was asking about you. He said he might visit soon." My heart skipped. "Are you sure, Beta?" "Yes, he said maybe this weekend." I smiled until my cheeks hurt. After she left, I walked around the house, straightening things that didn't need straightening, just to keep busy. That Friday, I cooked all his favorites again: the lentils with garlic tempering, the sweet semolina pudding, the fried okra. The smell filled every room with memory. By evening, I changed into a clean shawl and waited by the window. The clock struck 6, then 7, then 8. No one came. At 8:30, my phone buzzed. A short message: "Sorry, Mom, got stuck at work. We'll come next week." I stared at that one line for a long time. He had written Mom again. Just 3 letters, but they pulled tears to my eyes. Maybe, I thought, everything isn't lost. The next week, he did come. Sarah was with him, wearing a pale blue dress that shimmered in the sunlight. They looked good together, young, glowing, complete. I welcomed them with a smile that tried not to show relief. During tea, Ayan said quietly, "Mom, Sarah and I are thinking of moving abroad for a few years. There's a job offer in Dubai." The cup trembled slightly in my hand. "Oh," I managed, "that's wonderful, Beta." Sarah added, "It's a great opportunity and we'll be back often." I nodded, pretending to understand, but inside, I felt the walls around my world tightening. They stayed only an hour. When they left, I walked them to the gate. Sarah hugged me lightly. Ayan kissed my forehead. "Take care, Mom," he said. For a moment, the word mom sounded like music. But 2 weeks later, when they called to say their flights were booked, the music faded again. The day they flew out was quiet and cloudless. I went to the airport with them because I wanted to see them off properly. Sarah looked excited, scrolling through her phone, talking about packing lists. Ayan looked tired but proud, my hard-working boy chasing a bigger world. When the boarding announcement echoed through the hall, he turned and hugged me. "Don't worry, Mom. It's just for a little while." I smiled. "A mother always worries, Beta." He laughed softly, kissed my cheek, and was gone. As I watched them disappear into the crowd, a strange thought came to me. This time, he hadn't said when he'd be back. Months passed without a visit. Video calls replaced hugs. At first, he called every weekend, showing me their apartment, the view from their balcony, the neat kitchen that Sarah loved. I'd smile and say, "It's beautiful." But slowly, even those calls became shorter. The time difference, the work pressure, there were always reasons. I began recording small voice notes instead of calling, just tiny things, like, "Ayan, I made your favorite curry today," or "The jasmine bloomed again, just like when you were little." Most of them went unanswered, but I kept sending them anyway. It felt like leaving footprints for him to follow back home. Then, one evening, almost a year later, he called. His voice was different, flat, tired. "Mom, there's something I should tell you." My chest tightened. "What is it, Beta?" He hesitated. "Sarah and I are expecting. You're going to be a grandmother." My eyes filled instantly. "Oh, Ayan." For a moment, all the distance vanished. We laughed, talked about baby names, tiny clothes, lullabies. When I hung up, I felt a warmth I hadn't felt in years. Maybe this new life would bring us together again. But life doesn't always keep its promises. When the baby was born, they didn't come home. They sent pictures. Tiny fingers, closed eyes, a small pink hat. I stared at those pictures until my eyes ached. Everyone in the neighborhood came to see them on my phone. "Your grandson looks just like his father," they said. I smiled, but inside I longed to hold him once, just once. I asked gently, "When will you bring him to meet me?" Ayan said, "Soon, Mom. Maybe next year. Travel's difficult right now." Next year came and went. One morning, a courier arrived, a parcel wrapped neatly in brown paper. Inside was a framed photo of the baby, now a toddler. On the back, in Sarah's neat handwriting, "With love from all of us." Not from your son, not from your grandson, just all of us. I placed the frame on the mantel beside Ayan's childhood photo. The two faces looked at each other, one full of past, the other of future. And I stood between them, belonging to neither. That night, the power went out. The house was dark except for the flicker of a candle. In the silence, I whispered, Ya Allah, keep them safe. If I can't be near them, let them still feel my prayers. The next day, the phone rang again. It was Ayan. His tone was different, shaky, hesitant. Mom, are you sitting? My heart skipped. Yes, beta. What happened? He sighed. We're not doing well, Sarah and I. We argue a lot. She says I don't help enough with the baby. Work's been stressful. I listened quietly. Sometimes a mother doesn't need to fix, she just needs to hear. After a pause, I said softly, Marriage is like tending a garden, Ayan. You can't just plant and walk away. You must water it, even when you're tired. He didn't answer for a long time. Then he said, You always know what to say, Mom. My throat tightened. Because for a moment, Mom sounded real again. He promised to call again soon. He didn't. Weeks later, I learned from a mutual friend that Sarah and Ayan had separated temporarily. He hadn't told me. He probably didn't want to worry me, but that silence hurt more than any argument could have. I wanted to hold him, to tell him that every storm passes, but all I could do was pray for him at night, whispering his name into the dark. The news of Ayan and Sarah's separation spread quietly through the family. No one said it to my face, but I could feel their pity each time they looked at me. It wasn't shame that hurt, it was helplessness. A mother's heart doesn't choose sides, it just wants her child whole again. One evening, after Maghrib prayers, I decided to call him myself. He didn't answer. I tried again the next day. And the next. Finally, a week later, he picked up. His voice was hollow, like an empty room. Mom, I'm fine. Please don't worry. I wanted to say, I can hear you're not fine, but I stayed silent. Mothers learn to read between words. Have you eaten? I asked instead. He gave a small laugh, tired but familiar. Still the same questions, huh? I smiled through tears. And still the same answers, Deta. For a brief second, I felt the old closeness return. But before I could ask more, he said, Mom, I'll call you later, okay? I'm heading out. The line went dead before I could say I love you. That night, I couldn't sleep. Something inside me whispered that my son was drifting further away than ever. Not in distance, but in spirit. Days passed, then one evening a call came from an unknown number. It was Sarah. Her voice trembled. Auntie, I thought you should know. Ayan had an accident. The room tilted. My hands shook so badly I nearly dropped the phone. What kind of accident? She paused. He's alive, Auntie, but he's in the hospital. A car crash. He broke his leg, some ribs, but he'll be okay. Alive! The word echoed like a prayer answered. I'm coming, I said. The next morning, I took the earliest bus to Lahore. 5 hours on the road, gripping my prayer beads, whispering every verse I knew. When I reached the hospital, I found him asleep, pale and bruised. Bandages wrapped his arm, a monitor beeped softly beside him. My heart clenched. The same boy I'd once held after every childhood fall was lying before me again, helpless. I sat beside him and touched his hand gently. He stirred, opened his eyes. For a moment he looked confused. Then he whispered, Mom? That one word, it broke something open inside me.
Tears streamed down before I could stop them. "Shh," I said. "Don't talk. I'm here." He smiled weakly. "I knew you'd come." And for the first time in years, it wasn't just mom, it was my mom. Over the next few days, I stayed with him in the hospital. Fed him, helped him sit up, washed his face. The nurses thought I was his wife, until one of them asked and he corrected softly, "She's my mother." It was the proudest sentence I'd heard in a decade. Sarah came once, awkward, distant. She thanked me quietly and left after a few minutes. Ayan said nothing about her. I didn't ask. Some wounds need silence more than questions. When he was discharged, he insisted I stay with him for a while. We spent long evenings talking, really talking, for the first time since his marriage. He told me about the pressure, the loneliness abroad, the mistakes he'd made. I listened, my heart aching and healing at the same time. One night, as the lights dimmed, he said, "Mom, I was wrong. I pushed you away for no reason. I thought growing up meant cutting ties. But now I know I only cut my own piece." I reached out, held his hand. "You didn't lose me, beta. You just forgot where home was." He cried quietly, and I let him. Because forgiveness isn't words, it's warmth returning to cold places. A few weeks later, when he was strong enough, I went back home. Before leaving, I kissed his forehead and said, "Take care of your heart as much as your bones. Both can break silently." He smiled. "I'll come home soon, Mom. I promise." And this time, he kept that promise.
It was late autumn when Ayan came home. The air had changed, cooler, gentler, like the world itself had exhaled after holding its breath for too long. I remember hearing the familiar sound of a car stopping outside my gate. When I opened the door, there he was, standing with a suitcase, and that same shy smile he had when he was a little boy caught doing something right. "Mom," he said softly, "can I come in?" I wanted to laugh and cry all at once. I nodded and stepped aside, my voice too thick to answer. He entered the house like someone returning to a memory, eyes moving from one corner to another, pausing at old pictures, the familiar sofa, the shelf with his childhood books still neatly stacked. He looked back at me. "You never changed anything," he said. I smiled. "I didn't need to. You were always coming back." He placed his bag down and just stood there for a moment, unsure what to do next. Then he did something I hadn't expected. He walked toward me, knelt down, and hugged me. The kind of hug that carries years of regret, silence, and apology. "I'm sorry, Mom," he whispered, "for everything. For making you feel like you didn't matter. For forgetting who I was without you." I ran my fingers through his hair like I used to when he was a boy. "Shh," I said softly. "Mothers don't count mistakes, beta. We just wait for the door to open again." For the first time in years, we both cried openly. No pride, no distance, just two souls mending what time had broken. In the days that followed, our home slowly came back to life. He made tea in the mornings, sometimes burnt the toast, and laughed about it. We'd sit together in the evenings, watching the sun fade behind the fields, talking about everything and nothing. He started calling me Mom again, so naturally, so easily, that sometimes I'd pause and close my eyes just to hear it again. Every time he said it, a piece of my heart that had gone quiet began to beat louder. One afternoon, while folding laundry, he said, "You know, Mom, I used to think love was about big things, providing, achieving, doing everything right. But it's not. It's about the way you waited for me without bitterness. You didn't punish me for forgetting you." I looked up and said, "Because you never stopped being my son. You just lost your way. And when a child loses his way, a mother lights a lamp, not to call him back, but to make sure he can see the path when he's ready." He smiled and said, "You always speak like that, softly, but it stays with me." Winter came. One evening, as we sat near the fireplace, he handed me a small wrapped box. He said, "For you." Inside was a silver locket, simple, elegant. When I opened it, there was a tiny picture of him as a child on one side and the word "Mom" engraved on the other. I couldn't hold back my tears. He took my hand and said, "No matter where I go, you'll always be with me. I won't ever let distance or pride come between us again." I smiled through my tears. That's all a mother ever wants to hear. We didn't need many words after that. Sometimes love doesn't need to be spoken loudly. It's in the silence, the glance, the warmth of shared memories. That night, after he went to sleep, I sat by the window again, the same one where this story began. The rain was falling softly, almost like a whisper. I looked at the framed photo on the wall of Ayan smiling beside me when he was 10, and I whispered, "Thank you, Allah. You brought my son home." I realized something then. Love never truly disappears. It waits. It forgives. It heals in its own time. And sometimes all it takes is one word, "Mom," to bring life into a heart that had forgotten how to beat. It has been a few years now since that day Ian came home. The seasons have changed many times since then, yet some mornings still feel exactly like the one when he left. Except now, when I look out the window, my heart is calm. There is no ache, only memory, soft, quiet, forgiving. He calls often now, sometimes just to ask, "What are you cooking, Mom?" Other times to share small things, a new project at work, a joke his little boy told, or a story from his day. He doesn't realize it, but every time my phone rings and his name flashes on the screen, my heart whispers a small prayer of thanks. He visits every few months, and when he does, the house feels alive again. Laughter fills the kitchen. The kettle whistles too long. The same old clock ticks with a rhythm that feels like music. And when he leaves, I no longer cry, because I finally understand something I didn't before. Love doesn't live in walls or miles or daily calls. It lives in the quiet knowing that no matter where our children go, they still carry us in their hearts. Sometimes, when I sit alone in the evening, I think about the years I spent waiting, all those long nights, unanswered calls, unspoken prayers. I used to believe those were wasted moments. Now I know they were sacred. They were the hours that shaped my patience, tested my love, and taught me what it means to truly let go. Being a mother is not about being needed all the time. It's about being remembered when it matters most. It's about giving love freely, even when it's not returned right away. It's about standing at the door, not to hold them back, but to keep the light on until they find their way home. I once read somewhere that a mother's love is the first home her child ever knows. I think that's true. And like every home, sometimes children leave to build their own. But the foundation, the warmth, the lessons, the gentle prayers whispered in the dark, those never crumble. When Ion's little boy visits now, he calls me Nani. He runs through the same hallway his father once ran through, laughing the same laugh, touching the same walls. And sometimes, when I hold him close, I feel as if time has looped back, as if life is gently telling me, see, nothing was lost. It just came back in another form. One evening, while putting him to sleep, he asked me, Nani, when does love stop? I smiled and whispered, it doesn't, Betha. Love doesn't stop. It just changes shape. He closed his eyes and drifted off to sleep, and I sat there feeling the truth of my own words. As I look back now, I don't remember the pain as much as I remember the lessons. I learned that sometimes silence speaks louder than words, that forgiveness is not weakness, it's freedom, that waiting isn't about losing time, it's about keeping hope alive, and that even the smallest word, mom, can carry a lifetime of meaning. If there's one thing I could tell every mother who's ever felt forgotten, it would be this: don't lose heart. Even when your child walks away, your love still walks beside them. Even when they stop calling, your prayers still whisper their names into the universe. And even when the house feels empty, remember, you filled their hearts so deeply that a part of you will always live there. Now, every night before I sleep, I thank Allah for one thing. Not that my son came back, but that my heart stayed open long enough to welcome him when he did. Because love, in the end, is not about holding on. It's about never closing the door. And if Ion ever forgets again, that's all right. This time, I won't be waiting by the window with tears. I'll be waiting with a smile, because I know he'll always find his way back to Mom.